Have you ever thought, we've read the books, we've gone to a weekend retreat, we've tried date nights. Why does our marriage still feel stuck? So, what do? You keep collecting more resources, more tips and tools, better communication scripts. Maybe you download some free guides like, 10 ways to reconnect, and they help for a little while, right? But then stress hits again and old patterns surface, and it feels like you're right back to where you started. Well, in this video, I want to talk about what healing your marriage actually looks like beyond quick fixes and why you're not failing just because the simple tips haven't been enough. Hi, I'm Debbie Cottle. Welcome to my channel, Marriage in Bloom, where I help faith-based couples just like you move from that place of either just quiet, slowly drifting and being disconnected to full-blown crisis, transforming them into marriages that feel emotionally safe and honest and alive again. In other words, they've begun to bloom again. In my work with couples, I hear some version of this all the time. We tried a weekend retreat. We've talked to our pastor. We've even done a little bit of counseling, and we've promised that we're going to do better with each other. And then they say, all of those things helped, but they didn't last. And it's not because I don't believe it's because they're lazy or uncommitted to each other or bad Christians. That's not what's going on at all. And it's not because what they tried was bad. It's because what they tried was a Band-Aid on a much deeper wound. I love this metaphor because in every marriage that I work with, there is some type of deep wound that couples are just slapping a quick fix on. And then every time that wound gets poked, ooh, it's tender. This is where the blowups happen. And this is where, someone is shutting down because it's painful. This has been triggered, right? Well, today, what I want to do is I want to pull back the curtain a bit and I want to show you the stages that real sustainable change actually goes through in order for it to last. So let's start with the weekend retreat or the self-help book that you've read together. These can be awesome assists for your marriage. And I'm not saying don't do them. And you're going to come home after a weekend retreat feeling hopeful, feeling renewed, feeling inspired. Nothing wrong with that. That's how you should feel. But here's the problem. You're going back to the same house, the same stress, the same unhealed hurts, the same nervous systems that have practiced the same responses for years. And a 2 or 3 day high that comes from that retreat doesn't erase years of unrepaired arguments or patterns of shutting down or exploding, or the deep stories that you both carry about what love is and what emotional safety looks like and your own sense of worth and value. Stories that predate each other, go all the way back to childhood. And they don't change the way that your faith can sometimes get tangled up with guilt and shame and pressure or perfectionism. So when the glow of the retreat wears off, and it will, and the old patterns come back, you might think, well, we spent all that money because they're not cheap. Did we do something wrong? Are we just too broken as a couple? Maybe this is as good as it gets. It's not true. You're not failing because quick fixes didn't transform everything. It's just that your marriage needs more than tips. It needs a process. In my experience, healing a hurting marriage moves through a few key stages, and they're not always perfectly linear, but they do build on each other. So let's talk about these stages. The first stage, no surprise, is awareness. You have to stop minimizing what is actually going on. Like, how deep and painful are these wounds? You got to name it. You got to be able to talk about it. So you got to be able to say to yourself and to each other, we're not just in a hard season. We are seriously drifting apart from each other. We're really disconnected. And we keep having the same fight over and over. Like, something's wrong. How come we can't resolve anything? I'm starting to feel more like your roommate, and that scares me. Awareness is humbling. Believe me, I know. It's hard to bring these things into the light of day. It's so much easier to pretend to the world and to ourselves that we're okay, that other people are a lot worse off. But you cannot heal what you are not willing to put a name to. Okay, the second stage is safety, emotional safety. Everybody thinks communication is the problem in their marriage, but that is not usually the problem. Because before you can communicate better, you need a safer place to be honest. That means you have to learn to slow down when conflict escalates instead of going straight into your typical pattern, attacking or retreating, right? You've got to be able to understand each other's nervous systems. Who tends to be the one to pursue? Who is the one that tends to shut down? And what is it that triggers each of you to go into that mode and why? You need a guide or a structure or both that makes it less scary to just talk about these things out loud. If you don't have emotional safety, communication tools just become weapons in each other's hands. You start saying things like, well, you didn't listen to them when they told us what to do, or you're not doing it right. You know what this looks like. You've been on the receiving end of your spouse twisting all of these self help books, all of these tools, all these quick fixes. And now it feels like help is just something that's damaging you even more. But when you have emotional safety in your relationship, those same tools actually become bridges from where you're at to where you want to be. All right, the third stage is repair. This is where you start going back to those wounded places that still really hurt and you actually tend to them. So that might be the comment that really cut deep and you brushed it aside, or the years that you felt alone raising the kids by yourself because your spouse was working crazy hours, maybe on the road traveling, or the crisis that shook your trust that you've never really fully processed together. Repair isn't about just rehashing everything in excruciating detail, not helpful. It is about slowing down enough to say, that moment really hurt me, or I didn't know you felt that alone, or I'm sorry for the way I handled that. Here's what I wish I had done instead. Real repair changes the emotional story between you. This is where your nervous systems begin to say, oh, okay, we can go back to those hard places and we can talk about them and we can come out actually feeling more connected with each other, not more damaged. See how essential that is? And that leads us to that fourth stage, which is finding new ways of connecting. Only after you have started building awareness and safety and repair, only then does the how to stuff really stick. Okay. A lot of times, quick fixes, they just give you behavioral changes. They just tell you have more date nights or, speak each other's love languages in these specific ways. And those things don't work until you've gone through the other three stages first. So in this fourth stage, this is where you practice things like new ways of approaching each other in conflict and new daily rhythms of checking in and showing each other affection, praying together, playing together, being playful, and having new boundaries that honor and protect each other's limits without punishing the other. These aren't one-time decisions. These are things that you practice. You don't just try them once and then go, well, that didn't work. No, you rehearse them over and over until they begin to feel natural. All right, let me give you a very simple behind the scenes glimpse of what this looks like in my work with couples in my 6-month transformative program called Marriage in Bloom. We don't start with a list of do these 10 things differently. No, we start by me listening, really listening to your story, each of your stories, because your stories are going to be different from each other, and listening to your pain points. What are those wounds, and what are the patterns of how you guys interact with each other? And then we map that out. I like to call it a dance. Who's pursuing, who's pulling away, who's exploding, who's shutting down and freezing the other person out, and what your fights actually sound like underneath the surface. The surface fighting, there's a lot of annoyance and irritation and frustration and even anger. But underneath that lives something very much deeper core feelings that we get to. All right. And then we create a safe method so that when those hard conversations happen, you don't just feel like you're alone and drowning in them, right? Like we're having this really hard conversation and my spouse is one who retreats, I'm feeling abandoned, or my spouse is pursuing me, I feel overwhelmed and completely paralyzed by the intensity of this emotion. Okay. No, we're going to create a safe way to talk about these difficult things. And I help you find language to explain what's really going on. so that you stop thinking, oh, this is just one or the other of us being really difficult to live with. No, this is your nervous system trying to protect you. And then step by step, we work through naming those quiet resentments, those old wounds, the disappointments, the hurts, the betrayals that have never had a safe place to land. And then we practice in the moment skills for what happens when you get triggered so that you can stay engaged without blowing up or shutting down. What that actually really means is that in your coaching sessions with me, we're going to practice the skills and role play them. Because what we want to do is build new habits of how to check in with each other. And beyond that, how to express appreciation to each other. And finally, just learning to open up and share your internal world again. Because right now, you're just having logistical conversations. What's your day look like? What are the kids doing? Have you paid this bill today? This is a structured program, but we do it very tenderly. Okay. We don't just add a bunch of information and throw it at you. We're creating real experiential change, and we're doing it in a way that honors your faith. I'm not going to shame you with scripture. We're going to actually invite God into this actual mess, the fear, the anger, the numbness that you're feeling, and the longing. If you've been beating yourself up because all these quick fixes haven't actually fixed your marriage, I hope you can just exhale a little bit because you're not behind everybody else and you're not the only couple who feels this way. It's so normal. And you're not asking for too much when you long for a marriage that's more than what you have right now, that feels safe and nurturing and alive. Sometimes we treat healing casually, like we're just downloading a new app. But instead, we need to treat it like we're learning a new language together. I'm learning Spanish right now, and it's awkward. The words don't just roll off of my tongue. I make a lot of mistakes. I need a teacher. I need a guide. Learning a new language is like that. In this structured program, you learn the new words of language to speak to each other and to understand what's actually going on. Words of safety and honesty and tenderness until they become your native language. If this picture of healing resonates with you and you're thinking, this is exactly what we need more than tips and quick fixes. We need a process. I'd love to keep walking through this with you. That's what I do on this channel. I share regular videos for couples just like you to help you build and progress through those 4 stages so that you have that deeply connected marriage. If that's what your heart's craving, then please subscribe and tap that notification bell. And if you're at the point where you know you need someone in your corner, a guide, a clear structure, and a safe place to practice new ways of being together, that's exactly why I created Marriage in Bloom. It's my high touch, faith informed program for couples who are drifting seriously apart or they're already in crisis and they need to and are ready to move beyond the quick fixes into real lasting transformation. Just click the link in the description below to learn more and see if it might be a good fit for you. Your marriage is allowed to heal in layers. It doesn't have to happen all at once. You're allowed to take your time, and you definitely don't have to do this alone.